Hi everyone, today we're going to be doing the assembling of a 5-panel bustier. If you don't have your pattern yet, you could get it on my site toolfully.com, and we'll be doing it with a parent zipper in the back and lining. So this is the pattern of the bustier 5-panel. The center front is on fold and I have the opening in the back. So I already cut and fused all my pieces for the self fabric. Now I'm going to pin them together, just one pin, to make sure that I put them and sew them the right side. So just like that, one side, and then I'll do the other side. So now that they're all pinned together, we're going to go assemble the seam allowance of 1 centimeter for all the seam. I just want to make a point on the fact that there's many seams, so if you take a little less or a little more because of that many seams, it could change the size of your bustier very easily, so make sure you respect your seam allowance. So now the bustier is all assembled. You're going to go press all seam allowance open and make sure you use your hand to press the curve area. So for this bustier, I cut the lining exactly like the top part of the bustier. So we're going to place it and pin the same way we did for the top part or the self fabric. So now that they're all pinned, we're going to go assemble again with the seam allowance of 1 centimeter all the seam. So now all the pressing is done on the lining and on the self fabric. I just want to give you the little tip for the pressing. Just press from the top to the waist level and then turn your garment around and press the bottom part. Don't try to go all the way because you're going to create some more crease on your fabric. So 2 steps, one up and one down. Okay, so now on the pattern there is only a 1 centimeter seam allowance at the center back. To assemble with my zipper, I'm going to use 1.5 centimeters, so a little wider since the zipper is apparent. So the 0.5 extra is from the fabric to the middle of the zipper. That's about 5 millimeter. And if I'm sewing at 1.5, I'm going to remove 1.5 at the center back of my lining. So in the next step, we're going to go assemble the zipper to the self. So right side with right side, start at 1 centimeter and 3 millimeter from the bottom, and we'll do the same on top. But before you start sewing, I suggest you do fold the tape or the tail of your tape, fold it and pin it before starting, both sides. diagonal. So I said the seam allowance is 1.5, and I'm going to be able to sew up to here. So usually you have like a 3 or 5 millimeter excess of fabric there. So you're going to sew parallel all the way. So to sew very close to the zipper, I'm going to use my baby foot. That's exactly the distance I need, keeping my seam parallel to the zipper. So now you're going to place your bustier on the table, put your lining face to face with your fabric, and you're going to assemble the center back of the lining with the self at half the seam allowance. That means if I had 1.5 here, I'm going to stitch them together at the width of the foot, 0.7. I'm going to stitch them like that. Both sides exactly the same thing, top to bottom. So now that the zipper is in sandwich between the lining and the self, we're going to sew the top part. Still the fabric is right side with right side. So look at the corner. Now what you have to do is fold at the first seam we did. This one here, you fold. So that means you're folding also the teeth of the zipper. So fold right there. And you're going to see about 5 millimeter before the lining. And this way, you see, the seam all match. Okay, so we're done sewing the top part at 1 centimeter. Now what we're going to do, we're going to start as far as we can and do an understitch on the lining with the seam allowance. So the next step is going to be to turn it inside out, push your corner out by folding the seam allowance. Fold the seam allowance towards the other seam allowance and push your corner out. The little shift we did with the seam allowance give you that neat corner, and you're sure that your zipper is not going to get stuck into the lining. So we're almost done. We just have to assemble the bottom now, and we're going to do it in 2 steps, keeping a little hole to be able, and we'll close that hole by hand, or I'll show you another way after. So to close, we're going to fold exactly like we did on top. So that means at the seam, fold also the tape of the zipper, and we're going to sew like that until a little more than half of the garment. So the first seam I did was the longest part. I went all the way to more than the half, so I passed the seam, the princess line, and I was able to sew the second side, always keeping the garment in its final position. I was able to go all the way up to there. Now if I turn it out, you're going to see that I end up with a little opening to close or by hand, or I'm going to sew it, this one with the machine, So to be able to close it, I'm going to first open one of the seam allowance close to the opening. Now we're going to go by the inside, grab the seam allowance, pull it out to be able to close that little up. So as you saw, I finished the closure, the last closure by the seam, by stitching at 1 millimeter on the open area, and that's the final result. So I hope you enjoy, and I see you next time. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel.